Good morning. My name is Alex Klavens, and for my CAPS project, I studied political satire and its relationship to the media, and I also started a satirical news publication here at North called The Fig. What I love about The Fig, what I think is the best thing, is that people read it. And that may seem like a slightly low standard for a written publication, and sure, it kind of is. But people continue to read it, and we've gotten great feedback. And when people continue to return to our site, it shows that they enjoy reading it. And enjoying reading something is also a very basic, fundamental standard for something written. And with satire, the basic fundamental is that you should enjoy it. The main way that people are connecting to this is that people are interested in something and hearing comedic commentary on that. Now, when I became interested in satire, or in news in general, I was in 7th grade. There was a special election in Massachusetts between Scott Brown and Martha Coakley for a Senate seat. And there was tons of news coverage, and over the course of that year and throughout middle school and the beginning of high school, I began to really develop this inner hunger for knowing what's going on in the world. And I started watching the evening news every night. I would read the Boston Globe every morning. And this really made me want to know what was going on in the world. And I developed a sort of working knowledge of the media, politics, government. And when I got to North and took the class Close Up, taught by Mr. Vignone, these interests were really solidified, and Vig also provided a platform for furthering those interests. And what he also did was introduce me to political satire. During a unit on the Middle East, he brought up this article by a publication called The Onion. The article was titled, "Rural Whites Prefer Ahmadinejad to Obama." And this was published just before the 2012 presidential election. And I mean, this is obviously not true, and it's satirical, and that didn't really mean much to me at the time. I just thought, okay, this is funny. I laughed. Voila. But what this did was he introduced me to an art of comedy that involved things that I was interested in, which was media, which was politics, government. And with that, my interests became the fuel for this comedy. I began to read The Onion further. Throughout high school, I started watching The Daily Show, The Colbert Report, other satirical and comedic news things. And what I realized over the course of this time was that not only did these news outlets, these satirical news outlets, comment on things that I was really interested in, but they were really focusing on what was absurd about them, what was absurd about politics, what was absurd about everyday human behavior. And the absurdity fueled satire. It wasn't the subjects themselves, it was what was crazy about them. And there's absurdity in all things in life on a larger scale, in bigger institutions, such as the fact that politicians claim to try and promote bipartisan, yet hold large conventions screaming idealistic, non-compromisable values in an everyday human behavior setting. The fact that some of you here today could be hearing the coolest thing ever, yet are enjoying it at the moment, mainly because you don't have to write your English paper outline. And there are absurdities, again, found in almost all aspects of life. And when paired with comedy, with the media, you get this, what I call the satirical experience. A new experience of your understanding of the way things are. And because of this, your outlook on reading the news is gauged by an interest in satire, by an interest in what is absurd about that. Now, satirists are humorous with a message, and that message can often relates to countering a dominant narrative, or what is the sort of societal norm, way things are story that is told by mainstream media outlets. And the thing with activists, anybody can really be an activist with any issue. One problem is that they can be seen as militant or too ferocious in their ideas. Another problem is that they can be seen as too cynical. But a thing about this is that we all have cynicism inside of us. We all are bitter in some way or another. And there's a message behind that. There's a message in that we think there's something wrong with the way things are. And what satirists do, such as Jon Stewart, is gauge this cynicism, gauge our contempt for what we don't like, our contempt for the way things are, what is wrong with mainstream narratives, and use humor to really show us why there are problems within that. Now, I think humor is an incredibly powerful tool, and without it, satire would simply be activism. And humor is understanding, and laughing is listening. When you are made to laugh, there's a physical connection developed between the humorist and his or her audience. That laughing, when you laugh, your body is reacting to something that you enjoy, and you want more of that. And because of that, you continue to listen further. And by listening, you are opening up your ears to both an enjoyable experience and a potential to really hear what that person is saying, whether that is an explicit message or a more implicit message. And because of this listening, you are understanding, or on some level, you have a platform to be able to provide an understanding of whatever issue they may be talking about. And throughout my experience in gaining an interest in satire, throughout many people who have similar stories, you develop this thing that I like to call the satirical mindset, or an implicit attitude towards the media, towards everyday situations, where you're thinking in terms of what would The Onion write about this? What would Jon Stewart say about this? And with this attitude, you are really able to see absurdities. And I find myself often thinking in absurdities. What is absurd about this situation? What is absurd about a site that I'm viewing on the internet? And I find myself not only observing that, but really seeking that out. One thing that I've become a huge fan of since really engaging with political satire is watching Fox News avidly, because Fox is one of the cable news channels that is very partisan, meaning it supports a certain political value, in its case, conservative Republican ideals, and I find myself trying to seek out the absurdity in that. I do that with other news sites, but they don't really do it as well. And in terms of the CAPS project, I find the whole CAPS structure phenomenal, and it's really been a perfect tool for me to explore my interest in political satire further. Most people go into CAPS, as did I, with this idea of a project. Someday, before CAPS started, I had this idea that I could start a satirical newspaper at Newton North, because a lot of people don't really read that kind of stuff. And then you get there, as Perry mentioned, and you're like, oh, wow, we have to write an academic paper. God. And what I found was that the experience of writing an academic paper, which focused on political satire's relationship to the mainstream media, was more of a, say, 16 weeks of me better understanding what I love about satire, why I experience the media and my life in a more nuanced way because of my engagement with this. And the CAPS structure often provides this opportunity to, you have a research question, you explore that, and you try to find an answer or find broader questions to go from there. And I found myself really using that and not particularly solving any particular question, while I did explore many, more solidifying those questions as legitimate points of view, as legitimate things that I would like to think about to myself. And here's an article from the Fig. Fleischman suggests the Onion as name for local satirical news publication. This was one of the first articles that I wrote for my project, and it's criticizing our superintendent for, I mean, as many of you know, plagiarizing a speech at graduation last year. And this was one of the first articles that I wrote for the FIG, and I'd like to talk about why I think the FIG is its place in Newton North and our content, what that does well. People are able to relate to what we talk about. Most of our stuff is relatable to high school students in many cities, but often to people at Newton North. And in this situation, a lot of people, Mr. Gianquitti can't stop laughing. A lot of people didn't really know how to react. They were like, okay, Fleischman plagiarized. I do that all the time. And in that, there were, sure, like the Newtonite might have commented on that for whoever reads the Newtonite, and I'm sure there was stuff in the Newton tab about that for whoever reads that, but there wasn't really a way for an average discussion to have a conversation about that other than making some, little joke about snow days or whatever. And what I tried to do with this piece is, in this piece and in other pieces, use something that is relatable to high school students, such as this example. Use the tools of political satire as a means to give a message, to distribute this message. And the message isn't necessarily an explicit message. I don't have a goal with this. The goal is more about thinking, and that's really the goal with all of satire. It's more about thinking about how things might be outside of what is commonly perceived. And my goal with the FIG in general, my sort of idealistic goals, are to expose high school students at North and beyond to this idea of political satire, because going on, even just checking out the Onion's Facebook page, only less than 50 of my Facebook friends like that page. And what that tells me is that that type of literature is not relevant to many high school students. And it's been such a profound piece of my high school experience that I would like to share the idea of that. And through relatable material in the FIG, writing with myself, and I also have other students writing for this publication, using material that is relatable to students to distribute this message of thinking beyond what is said normally. As the Onion does, as the Daily Show does, we'd like to show people the way things are, but you might not think they are. You can check it out at whatthefig.org. Thank you very much.